Buyers decide in the first 8 seconds of seeing a home if they're interested in buying it. Get out of your car, walk in their shoes, and see what they see within the first 8 seconds. And that is the well-regarded and well-known Barbara Corcoran. And with that, welcome to House Einstein podcast number 70. With me
We made it.
We made it. To 70. I didn't really think of 70 as a milestone, but we made it to 70. And I think the next real milestone will be 100. But yeah, welcome to the House Einstein podcast. I'm your host, Osman, with the House Einstein brokerage. With me is Hamish, your co-host. And I just heard my phone beep. I should turn it off so we don't get interrupted. But yeah, welcome to the House Einstein podcast. Hamish, do you want to tell us about a core topic today?
Yeah, our core topic today, we're focusing on sellers. You've heard a lot about there being a buyer's market, so we're going to talk to the sellers out there. Sellers need to get realistic about market conditions. We're going to talk about how to do that. Sellers are also holding off on listing because of the down market, and particularly at the high end. We're also going to take a closer look at the ultra high end. Osman, you've sent over a cart of 10 million plus in Boulder, so that's going to be eye candy, but probably some heartbreak in there too.
Yeah. Well, one of our sellers who is holding off on listing asked about some of the ultra high-end listings that she has seen come across her screen, and with incredulity. And so we decided, well, let's look at that as well as part of the topic of what's happening in the current market and how to think about it realistically as a seller.
Yeah. We're hoping to be kind if you're a potential seller and you're listening to this. This is also an entertainment podcast. Under advice from our attorneys, this is not real estate advice. This isn't financial advice, nor is it investment advice. Strictly entertainment. Osman, if you're a client of ours, what should they do?
Oh, well, the answer is pick up the phone and call your House Einstein agent. If you are a prospective client, you can visit us at houseeinstein.com and click on the team page and see who we are, and we would more than welcome a phone call or an email from you, and we can help you with your specific real estate needs. But for everyone that's just listening, this podcast is entertainment.
Absolutely. Topics today, I think we kind of jumped into setting expectations or talking to sellers about the buyer's market and what that means for them if they are deciding to list. Further on, though, we've got our shameless self-promotion. Is that Dream House one and shameless self-promotion, is that the person who reached out or the person we met with? I'm trying not to name here.
That's the person we've already met with.
Okay.
Not the person we're meeting with.
Okay. So we've got a buyer and seller. We've got a buyer and seller in the promo. Sales of the week, we kind of jump around, but some pretty gorgeous ones in there. Some of them we've seen, some of them we were directly involved in. And then news. We'll let the news speak for itself, but maybe good news, maybe bad. A little bit of both. Pretty guaranteed there. After that, we've got Carveouts. Some pretty good topics there too, and then we'll wrap it up. Oz, anything I miss?
No, that's our table of contents for this podcast 70. So let's get into it. This podcast is sponsored by House Einstein. We serve buyers and sellers in Colorado, focusing on Boulder, Denver, and several mountain resort towns, including Breckenridge and Winter Park. Our mission is simple: help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can learn more at houseeinstein.com or our YouTube channel, where you'll find videos on neighborhoods, specific listings, and much, much more. What is the core idea here for our podcast? The core closing table topic is about how to set realistic expectations for sellers and the need for agents to do that because, well, the frenzy's over. And as last summer's market dictated, as last summer's market exemplified and surprised so many sellers and so many agents, buyers were not quite as aggressive. Frankly, they were skittish and fickle. They were more likely to terminate a deal after going under contract and much more selective, hesitant to write offers. And of course, all of that depends on price range and specific condition of the home, property type, real estate is hyper local, and as we go through today's sales of the week, you'll even see some bidding wars, which might surprise you if you heard just the beginning of this podcast about setting realistic expectations. But clearly the frenzy is over, and we have covered that in quite a bit of detail by going over market conditions in past podcasts. But the general gist, and this doesn't change that quickly in Boulder or in Denver, is that there's been an inventory pileup. Inventory is much, much higher than a year ago, and that is particularly true the further up in price you go. At the entry level, there's not quite as much pileup because, well, there's a lot more buyers. But entry level and mid-range buyers tend to be more interest rate sensitive. So it can be a little bit of a mixed bag, and the market can sometimes catch you off guard. So how do you think about that when you are getting ready to list your home and you're meeting with a real estate agent, like one of the agents in our company? What should you expect to occur as you are thinking about listing your home? We have an appointment this afternoon, and it's a very thorough seller, somebody who I've known for many years actually, and she has lots and lots of questions about how this process is going to unfold. And she's very astute. I would say she's not just a student, she might be a master of her local neighborhood market conditions. And her biggest concern is a valid one, that it seems like a lot of agents do their initial work and stick a sign in the yard and nothing else happens. And I don't deal with other agents as a customer or a seller or a buyer, but I can see watching from the sidelines that it doesn't appear that other agents are doing this process. But here's what we advise. Here's what we think is the right way to do it. And as a seller, this is the type of thing I would expect to see from my agent. And in the beginning, one of the first questions typically sellers ask is, what's my house worth? What do you think it would sell for? And that's an initial pricing analysis. A halfway decent agent's going to know what Zillow thinks your house is worth, and is probably going to target either slightly below or slightly above that and do no work. Or
and Zillow has like a 8% incorrect rate, right?
A few years ago, they were saying 9% is their median, incorrect, it was a margin of error, as they described it. But that's the most easy. I don't want to do any work. I'm just going to go see what Zillow prices your home at right before the meeting. An agent that does a little more analysis will know several comps in the neighborhood and have reviewed them, which is basically a 15 to 20 minute process. But that way they can at least talk intelligently about the other sales in the neighborhood. But really, a thorough pricing analysis is going to look at the condition, is going to look at the updates, is going to think about the layout too, because homes that have a compromised layout don't sell as quickly as homes that have the preferred layout for many buyers. And they're going to think about how much work it's going to take for you to get this home in marketable condition before they throw out numbers. And that initial pricing analysis we often do as a video call, because it used to actually do a print report and then meet with the client and try to go through it on paper. And that, as long as the client is
upon request.
The video meeting is so much more real time and answers questions in real time. But some people aren't comfortable with video meetings. They may not be tech savvy, although that's not very common in Boulder. Even people of all ages in Boulder tend to be pretty darn tech savvy. But if they're not comfortable with a video call, we'll do it with paper and or we'll bring my laptop and we'll do it in real time. But that sets the initial kind of price range, plus or minus 5%. And by the time you actually have the house ready, it could have shifted up or down. The next stage, once you've engaged this agent, at least on our side, is what we call a staging consultation. And we do it via PowerPoint. And sometimes the slide deck can be nearly 100 images, 100 slides long is our current one that we're working on.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that one's so long is it's a large property, and it's a seller who hasn't been in the property for a while, and we really want all these reference photos in the slide deck so that they get a much better sense of its condition and can plan appropriately. But that staging consultation is something that highlights what we think are the most important things to address to make the home marketable. And a lot of it is what you might expect: deep cleaning, decluttering, depersonalization. Those are the first three things that you tackle. And then there are things like flow through a room, removing excess furnishings, and if there's a budget, and we highly recommend there should be one in this market, there are things that are low-hanging fruit, like paint and refinished floors, window cleaning. That type of stuff is actually regrouting and caulking. That type of stuff can really make a difference because buyers make decisions on an emotional basis. And then so during that, we present the staging. Go ahead, Hamish. You were about to say.
You say surface level, but I mean, we went and saw a home this week that had, personal items out, wasn't decluttered, and didn't have the caulk. So, yeah, I was just remembering that. And then earlier on the pricing analysis too, it's through video. We'll do one before list, and we have seen a competitor pop up that had to, we kind of radically changed our initial pricing thought because that competitor popped up. Like, these are based on kind of experience, right?
Well, that's the next phase, is right before you go live, you really need to have seen the competition. But before we go that point, one thing I want to talk about with the staging consultation is that PowerPoint slide deck becomes like a checklist of all the things that you may want to do to your home. And maybe you don't want to do any of them. And we may not, in this market, choose to work with you as a seller because of that, because this market is getting tougher and tougher. And we just had 4 closings in a row. All of them have a story to tell, but there's a theme going on, at least for the sellers, that the market was slower than expected. Prices slid during the summer and fall into the winter. They've woken back up a little bit, but doing all that work up front to prepare the home for sale and keeping it in showing condition, following up for feedback, we'll talk about that too. All of that is critical for a successful sale. And the staging consultation is a really nice way to have that checklist, a visual reminder of what we're trying to achieve. And we sneak in some photos of, between the sections of the slide deck to illustrate what a properly staged home looks like. And depersonalization is one that sometimes catches people off guard. Particularly when I tell them that it doesn't matter what religious background you have, please remove all your religious stuff because, well, there will be people not of that religion seeing the house. And real estate is such an emotional decision that having things that subconsciously signal that you're not welcome in this home or that you're not included or inclusive in the audience of potential buyers turns people off. I once had a seller, Hamish, this is a long time ago, who insisted on not removing 2 things: their giant Texas flag and their framed photo of Ronald Reagan. And they were super conservative.
No, really.
And they refused to remove these things, and they also had some religious things in the home. We did eventually get the house sold, but that decision cost them tens of thousands of dollars, easy, because it turned off so many buyers who are not of that political persuasion or religious persuasion or such big believers in Texas. So
that's an interesting one.
It was really wild. This is before I used to do it in PowerPoint. I used to just tell people, we'd go through each room, and I would tell people this is what you need to do in each room. And that's, I think, what most agents do. And then it went to, let me write up a report. And now, as its current evolution is, we're doing a PowerPoint so that it's well documented what we're advising you to do. And then we also run a
punch list too,
It's a punch list, and we also run, absolutely. And we run it through multiple members of our team. So it's not just me and Hamish reviewing it. It's also other members of our team who catch things frequently that we might miss. So, in fact, today Sophie is reviewing that staging consultation. She's quite generously offered to spend some time looking at it, and she always sees things I missed.
Always.
So, deeply appreciate her level of attention to detail and her knowledge of design and how it impacts people's emotions going into a house. So, I know I'm belaboring this a little bit, but you really should think carefully about not taking your agent's advice on deep cleaning, floor refinishing, painting, decluttering, depersonalization, and the difference is night and day because it is such an emotional decision. And that's on top of pricing it right. People put so much emphasis on pricing it right, and that's where 90% of my emphasis used to be in the first few years of being in the real estate business. And now I know it's price it right and do this work, particularly in markets like today's market where sellers have to compete harder to attract a buyer.
And on top of that too, we have these buyers that love to scan bookshelves, and they'll make a comment too if there's no books in the house. They're like, interesting. buyers are going to profile you or do their best to create a profile of you when they're touring your home. So you're painting a picture. Be aware of the picture that you're painting. Maybe he had Reagan up because of his acting, you know.
Maybe, although he wasn't quite old enough to have Reagan be one of his favorite actors. I do agree with you, Hamish, on the books, and I also will look at the bookshelves to see what types of books do they have they chosen to display, and it does tell you something about who this person is. So yeah, be careful, because every aspect. This is also why it tells buyers to be careful going to an open house, because everything you do and say and your energy in that open house with that listing agent, it could impact the negotiation. And I once had a seller come into a buyer, my client, go to an open house, met the listing agent, and played it so cold that the listing agent was shocked when I called her the next day and said, okay, we're getting ready to submit an offer. She's like, who are your people? I didn't see your scheduled showing. And I'm like, well, they went to the open house. They feel like they're ready to buy. They really love the place. What were their names? What did they look like? I described them, and they're like, yeah, I met those people. I thought they hated it. and guess what? Our offer was very close to the top, or at the top of several offers. This is during the bidding war frenzy days, and she went with a different buyer. And I called her afterward, and she's like, I'm convinced your buyers were going to terminate. Like they terminate the deal.
Cold.
They were too cold. She felt like it was they weren't emotionally invested enough. So you're now forced as a buyer to, when you're touring an open house, to balance this. Love the house, but then how do you negotiate aggressively if you love the house? Or play it cold, but if there's competition, suddenly they think you don't want it enough and you're likely to terminate. So, these two things are both risks for a buyer, and agents are really good at reading people. And the more seasoned they are, the more likely they are experts at reading people, and they're reading your micro expressions, they're reading your body language, they're listening to everything you say, they're thinking about the questions you're asking, and all of that can impact the eventual sale price of the home, whether it's a bidding war frenzy or it's a stale listing with another open house. Everything impacts the sale and the negotiation. And as a seller, the books you have on display, the art you have chosen to leave up, says something. And you may want to consider whether it says what you really want it to say in terms of maximizing the sale price and making the negotiation easier and the whole sale process easier.
Absolutely. I remember, probably this was last year. We had some sellers bake vanilla to create that kind of like fresh cookie smell. Because even that sense, right, creates and triggers such a nostalgic response.
It's one of my classic things to advise sellers on is bake cookies before the first showing weekend.
Because we want the cookies.
That morning, get the tray of Ready Bake and bake a tray of cookies, but do not leave the cookies in the house. And the reason you don't leave the cookies is for liability, in case somebody has a nut allergy or something crazy and they ate your cookie that had, a hint of peanut in it. You don't want that liability, but you want the cookie smell. So take the cookies with you.
Snack on them later. Leave them at our office.
Yeah. No, we don't need them either. Well, you might need them, Hamish. You're lean.
I'll take care of them. Don't worry.
Yeah. I certainly don't need more cookies. Okay, so the next phase after that staging consultation is right before you go active. So you have now put in place all of the improvements that your agent has recommended, and maybe you have engaged professional staging, which is another level of service. House Einstein does include professional staging at some levels of service that we now offer. Some agents charge on the side for professional staging. Some agents will do the professional staging themselves. They maintain some inventory, but we prefer to bring in outside staging professionals when the home is vacant. If the home is not vacant, outside staging professionals typically don't want to work with the seller's things. The best ones refuse to. So just keep that in mind, that if we're not offering you professional staging, it's because you're planning to stay in the home, and we're going to have to work with you with what you have, and you've made that clear. So right before you go live, all of that has occurred. The home has been professionally staged or not. It's been updated, it's been improved, it's been deep cleaned, and our team has come in and done our photography and our videography, which is a process that can take anywhere from 10 to 14 days is what we like to say. We've done it in less than a week when we have had to, but we prefer to have 2 weeks so that we can adjust for weather, we can maximize the best time of day to take photography.
Same with staging consultation. We get more eyes on it, can make our tweaks.
we have time to send that to you and take in your feedback. And I mean, 2 weeks is really ideal it's a sweet spot for the time when the home is ready and the time the home hits the market. And then the very last thing we do, Hamish, what is it before we hit the go button?
It's the second round, right, of competitor analysis. We see what's the perhaps most lateral competitor out there, and we'll go see it. We'll invite you along too. Check it out and make a judgment. Are we above or below or equal to this property, and how do we want to position ourselves? Do we want to price a little bit higher and potentially sell the competition, or do we want to go a little bit lower and perhaps secure a buyer that was looking at the other one?
Right, absolutely. And that, as Barbara Corcoran said, we get in the car. And that means seeing these competitive listings firsthand. And lateral competitive, I think, is a nice way of phrasing it, but it's the most likely candidates the buyer for your house will be considering at the same time they're looking at your house. When they schedule 3 or 4 or 6 showings in a day with their agent, what are the other homes they're most likely to see? And it's shocking. It just blows my mind how few agents do this. But we do it routinely as a matter of practice, is to go see the competition, and and we will even bring our client with us if they're willing to join us to help them have a better sense of what their home has to offer. They have to put on their buying glasses and imagine they're the buyer. And if we are pricing higher than the nearest competitor, then we better be better than that nearest competitor, because if that other house is better and we're pricing higher, all we're doing is selling the other house. And maybe and if there is a better house that is less money on market and you're ready to go, the answer is delay the listing until that one sells, because all you're doing is creating the momentum to the other listing. Exactly.
And it's funny, we're talking as specific as we can, but as broad as we can, because it really does come down to your property type. If you have a view and the neighbor has slightly less of a view, or maybe you have slightly more. As a recent example, you've got heat pumps and better finishes and updates, but the other one is very outdated and just has a view, and it comes down to that strategy and how you want to play it very case by case.
And didn't have a neighbor that was potentially problematic in how often they were outside. And we don't know that for a fact, but it was a concern. And
they were
a legitimate.
They when I was filming it,
And it did feel a little less private because the neighbors were utilizing their patio so often. And what can you do about that? Bribe them to stay inside? That doesn't feel right. No. But at least you take that
bribe
into
them
account.
To be friendly, maybe.
Maybe. Bribery is kind of a funny way to describe it, but I have indulged in incentivizing tenants to keep a home in better showing condition. I have yet to incentivize a neighbor to declutter a backyard or drag their pay to have their junk vehicles removed. I haven't done that yet, but I would consider it if for the right
You've definitely
situation.
Floated it before, yeah.
Because I've floated it before because the neighbors can have just as much impact on the emotions around buying as your home can. In fact, more impact if it looks like the neighbor's a hoarder. That could really be a problem. And they could be a lovely human, but the fact that they've collected a lot of junk outside their house, and maybe you could pay to store the junk. Don't describe it as junk. You could say, look, we really would like to help sell the house. Is there a way we could work with you to store some of the unique collectibles that you put outside your home?
That's a great classic car. Maybe it should go in storage.
How about we pay for 6 months of storage for you? Something like that helps. That's a tricky one because people get offended. But if you're going to get offended at the listing agent. Don't get offended at the seller. And that's where be the bad cop for the seller and have that conversation. Okay, so Hamish is right. So once we've done that staging consultation and all of our marketing materials are ready to go, and we have reviewed the MLS listing with you, and we've seen all those competitors, and we've done our final pricing analysis, it's time to hit the activation button. And now we're on the market. And I used to tell my sellers, at least the last 5 years, that there's a really good chance that we're going to get an offer the first weekend. If we've done all our homework, there's a really good chance. And by that, I mean more than 50% probability. And today, I would say that probability is more like 5 to 10%, depending on price range, location, and all those other factors. Because buyers are much more fickle and
fickle
skittish,
is such a good word for it. Yeah,
hesitant and nervous and the feeling that they're buying, so the prices have fallen and dropped almost across the board, and this is year 3 of that. So my advice to buyers is, if you see the house worth buying, and it's priced right, odds are it's not going to drop much more, and you're going to lose out by sitting on the sideline. But if you see an overpriced listing and you're sure it's overpriced, you may want to wait. For the seller, you just have to have realistic expectations that it may not happen the first weekend for you. And we're now signing up people for much longer listing agreements because of this. Like, we know the market could be a lot slower. And then once we're live, this is what we do. We track the competition pretty much every week. And that means taking the time to go look at the old competitors and the most recent new competitors and what went under contract, what closed, and then providing that as a report to our sellers so they can see what's happening with the competitive landscape. And then we also text all of the agents. We reach out to them directly to get feedback. And it's so funny. So many of them are like, I missed your showing time feedback link. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I don't tell them we didn't send one, because no one gives us actionable feedback from the showing time feedback.
It's funny too. There's some that are like, I submitted it, through showing time. You're like, no, you didn't. I'm looking at it now.
Yeah. Sorry, I must have missed it. What did you think of the house? So we reach out to try to get actionable material information. And sometimes they're really rude, right? Sometimes they're like, house is garbage. It showed poorly. It can't believe their asking price. And sometimes that's a negotiation strategy. Like, we had a listing in Newlands where this agent from Denver came up and looked at the home for themselves, and then the feedback from them, I'm going to use a little foul language. They shat all over the listing and told us how little it was, like worth $900,000, which is like an insanely low number,
below dirt,
and below dirt value. And I looked at this and I'm like, I'm glad this is text messaging, because the smirk in my face from the Denver agent would be impossible to hide in the tone of my voice. So I messaged back, have you seen some of the land sales that are 200,000 or 300,000 above this in the neighborhood in the last 12 months? Of course I have, she wrote back. And I'm like, okay, cool.
You must travel a lot. Good for you.
Please, please submit an offer if you're serious. I will absolutely present it, which of course you're legally required to. And I did tell the sellers about that Denver agent trying to steal the house, and it was sort of funny, that feedback process, uncovered what some people would call bottom feeders, right? They're looking for desperate sellers and hoping that being really negative about the deal might help anchor a lower price.
It's the people that like the negging strategy, right?
It's a negging strategy. Exactly right. Yeah. It's a negging strategy, which is something I think that comes from the dating world, Hamish. Maybe you should. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you should not give that one a shot. Let's not do it. Okay. So the negging strategy for real estate negotiation is what you might get as part of feedback, but rarely. It's not very common that people try that. But the goal of the feedback is actionable feedback, because maybe we missed something. And in some cases, you can actually get your home on a luxury home tour with 20 plus luxury home agents that will give you anonymized feedback, which is even better, because you have no idea who said it as the seller, and these people have paid to be part of this network of high-end brokers. That is a tour that I was on the board of last year. I no longer have time to be on the board of this organization, but it's a great additional feedback loop that you can engage if your home qualifies for those, the criteria to be in the tour, and not every home does. So that's our approach to realistic selling, and we make sure that we do that on a consistent basis with the information being provided to the seller, and that we're adjusting our pricing based on the competition. But even when you do that, in some ways you're chasing, you're not leading. And when the market's been flattened down, the right move might be to lead with an intentionally low price. Not price it appropriately, but price it low. And we're going to have
trend, right?
That's called pricing ahead of the trend. So if the market's moving up, price it a little higher than the comps. If the market is moving down, intentionally price it below what the comps should be. But the caveat to that is only if you've done the other work. If you haven't done the staging consultation, improved all the things you needed to do emotionally about the house, depersonalized it, decluttered it, deep cleaned it, all the Ds. If you haven't done all those Ds, pricing it intentionally low, you might just, it may still be sitting on the market, and now you're anchored to that low price. So that's the risk of intentionally pricing ahead of the trend.
Yeah. I think, all to say what we're seeing now is listings are taking longer. The general impression that I hear for most agents is that, chuck a sign in the yard and call it quits. We're here setting the expectation that this listing may take a little bit longer. We've done all the prep. It's got a fantastic first impression. It's got a great emotional appeal. And we will continue to be, tracking the competition. And especially if there's a home that's close enough in a comparability, we'll go see it, get eyes on it to say, you know what, a price adjustment is necessary, or we're actually good. These guys are going to be selling us instead. But we're much more kind of active to the situation and setting that expectation that we've done a lot of work here to get the home in a marketable position, but it still just may be on the market for a bit longer, right? That 5 to 10% likelihood of an offer in the first weekend.
Right. Exactly right. And I want to add that, with our recent Shanahan listing, we had at least 3 meetings with the sellers where they wanted to drop the price, or at least they were asking us, should we drop the price? And after analyzing the conditions in the market and the most recent sales, the active competitors, the answer was no. It wasn't the price. The issue was it was the fourth quarter, it was like, it's the holidays, and let's just get through the holidays and then we'll reevaluate, mid-January. And we did. And at that point we, refreshed the listing with much better photography, and adjusted the price just slightly, lead the market slightly with a lower price, and boom, it was gone and sold at full list. And I believe our sellers were quite happy. We offered to take them out for a fancy dinner, and they said, please just donate some money to Sugarloaf Fire Department. And we're like, okay. And they also expressed appreciation. So I feel like they
just had like a medical, so
they valued the work dinner. We did.
Yeah. All this to say, once again, though, back to, I think we're gonna cover her in the shameless self-promotion, and we've brought her up a few times. But in her case, we told her not to sell. And we'll do that too. We're saying, is there any way you can hold on to this property until maybe the market's a little bit more favorable to you? And we've done that a few times just this year, because we want you to make a smarter real estate decision. We don't want you to just hawk it on the market if you can help it.
I mean, I think if you're looking to tell how much your agent cares about your interests, listen for when they give you advice that's against their interest. And we could easily take more listings, and eventually what happens with a seller that overprices or isn't willing to do the work is they capitulate, right? And most of the time the seller is locked into a long listing agreement with you. So I believe a lot of agents employ this strategy to harvest listings, to take listings, is that they tell the seller what they want to hear, that your home is worth way more than it really is, and that they alone have the massive secret sauce to selling it at this price. They have the magic algorithm, the prettiest website, the best reputation. Every agent in town knows I can sell for more than list, and that's all my listings sell for more. In fact, I charge more in commissions because I'm that good than most agents. Yeah. All of that kind of lines up with, ooh, it sounds like I want you. But they also know in the back of their head that you're the one that's going to be stuck with them, and they're not going to let you out of the listing agreement. So, they will hire an attorney, they will chase it down, and you will be stuck waiting out a very long listing agreement. So you eventually capitulate. You come back to reality on pricing, but at that point you've lost the honeymoon period, the first month or so of the listing. I mean, it used to be the first week or two, but it's a little longer now. After and that's costing you real money. You could argue, no, we're just waiting for the right buyer, and maybe in some cases that's true for unique properties, or particularly high-end properties. But you also could just have signed yourself up with somebody who knows how it goes. They've been around, and they know that if they overprice it, eventually it'll sell. They just have to keep dropping the price, and you may close the deal hating them, but at the end of the day, you want to sell the house and you capitulate. So watch out for people that tell you everything you want to hear, and look for people that have contrary indications of your interest in mind. In other words, they're saying things that don't benefit them. They're saying things like, you may want to wait another year before you
truly
list this
looking
home.
Out for your best interest. Yeah.
Or, we would love your listing, but it's October, and I would like to start. We could start working on it, but we don't want to activate this listing till January because the market is pretty much dead between now and January, and we're sort of testing the market and incurring a lot of cost when you really should just dot the I's, cross the T's, and list it in January, depending on when in the fourth quarter. Maybe October is okay, but I don't advise it. It's not a great time of year in a normal year to list a home.
Yeah.
So
right before we move, I say there was like that little bit of, I don't know, maybe fortunate timing or happenstance, but there was a time where that home was the only one on the market. There was nothing like it. And I think, wasn't that the decision maker to, you know what, it can stay on and it doesn't need a price adjustment because it is it's the only one like it.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting experiment this year. We had a couple of listings, and the typical advice is pull it off the market in November, bring it back in January. But what we were seeing was that we were the only game in town.
Yeah.
And we were still getting reasonable numbers of showings. So without a better plan for the refresh,
and
we decided
good feedback too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and good feedback. So we decided that it really wasn't worth pulling it off over the holidays, which is contrary to what a lot of agents do. But sometimes it makes sense to zig instead of zag. And we had those conversations with our sellers at that time. Both of those deals have now closed. And it's hard to say whether it was the right move or not, but it certainly didn't seem to hurt it to keep it on. And in our line of thinking, our clients make the call. We advise, we show them what we're seeing, and we have a little pros and cons discussion of the strategy before we pull the trigger on the next step. So, All right, well, that is our core topic for the day. And hopefully, as a seller, you're hearing that you need to be realistic. And you should also look for much beyond the fancy wrapper of your agent's brokerage and ask what additional services are they providing throughout the life of the listing, so that I am informed about market conditions, that I'm prepared to respond to feedback, that I've prepped the home appropriately and, of course, priced it right. And then when we actually get an offer, how are you helping with negotiation? What's your experience there? What things should I do to look out? What should I look out for as a seller so I don't end up getting sued for some disclosure issue in the future?
Or baking cookies and leaving them in the house.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions is tell me about the last time you screwed up on a deal. And walk me through a mistake you made. And I think that'll catch a lot of agents off guard when you ask that question, because they're never prepared for that question. But if they haven't made mistakes and they're not willing to tell you about the mistakes, how honest is this person? Like, what sort of relationship do you have? Because everyone makes
infallible
mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Tell me about a time, and listen for their ownership of a mistake, because certainly we have mistake stories too, and I'm happy to share some of them.
We've got a series coming. Yeah.
But we always learn from them. And we do actually have a series coming on lessons from recent closings. And I don't know as much as they're a mistake, but there's a lesson there that we didn't know we didn't know.
You're right. Good, good distinction.
There's this concept of knowledge. There's what you know, there's what you don't know, and there's what you don't know you don't know. Right? Like, there's another layer of what you don't know. And some of the lessons from recent closings were about what we didn't know.
Now I have to quote Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so.
Right. That's true too. Good old Samuel Clemens.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Time to be shameless?
Is it time to be shameless? I'm feeling kind of shameless. It's so
cool,
funny.
Yeah.
My mom's like passive-aggressive notes growing up. Mom, if you're listening, please forgive the story. But I'll never forget, like, we came home and my mom had come home to the house basically open and unlocked. And she had this note taped to the door. And the first word was shame. Shame, the doors are left open. I can't believe you. Animals live here. Something like, she would never have said animals.
Oh, I might have to do something like that here.
Yeah, shame.
Just shame. Yeah.
Shame. That's the first word of the personal note.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some shameless self-promotion. This is the segment of the podcast when we talk about some of the buyer and seller needs, the projects that we might be working on, and we're going to talk about a buyer and a potential seller. And the potential seller is actually also a buyer. So we're two different clients. The first client are a lovely family who are seeking a property, likely in Indian Peaks in Lafayette. That's sort of the sweet spot of quality of home, their price range, size of home, proximity to where they need to be for work and school, and also age of home. They have a unique need but they're willing to. I see you highlighting it, Hamish. They're willing to let that go. So Indian Peaks is not a
Curious
horse
one.
neighborhood, but they certainly, if they could magically get a horse or several horses to be stabled in this property, that would be spectacular, but it's not a requirement. And that's why there's nothing in Indian Peaks that I believe has horse potential. It's a golf course neighborhood. But
maybe
there's
near?
stuff near Indian Peaks that might work in unincorporated Boulder County. So that's what they're seeking, and I think they would be most comfortable under 2. I don't have an exact number for where their hard numbers are, but of course, like all of our clients, we're going to run the comps. So their price range is irrelevant to what the market value is. The market value dictates price, not the size of someone's wallet. So if you have a property that might work, that meets those characteristics, let us know. I think they prefer things a little more updated, but we've also seen some not so updated homes that had other features that they were looking for, like that horse potential. And the second shameless self-promotion is for a seller who has a very generously sized and now beautifully updated home in Newlands. And it's in a spectacular location. They have invested considerable resources in making it look absolutely beautiful. And because the high end of the market, the $3+ million segment, is so saturated and so competitive, they feel like, and has also dropped so much in price, they feel like they're not in any rush. They've lived in the community for years. They've seen these up and down cycles. They're going to wait it out. They're not going to list right now. So if you're looking for that amazing property, because it's super rare to get this size of home in Newlands and also this turnkey, they might entertain a offer, but it would have to be really compelling. So keep that in mind. But what they're looking for is really what this promotion's about. And the shameless self-promotion segment, it may be harder to find what they're looking for than selling their house, because of the rarity of this type of house in Newlands, I don't think it would be that hard to sell in a normal market. But the prices would be higher in a typical market in Boulder than this current downdraft. Yeah. What they're seeking, do you want to try to describe it, Hamish?
Oh, I'm like imagining she's listening, and if you are, and I missed something, it's my bad. But it's like I'd say very close to kind of like a hobby farm, rural feel ranch in the sense of animals, but not necessarily a home type. And it doesn't have to be, a horse property or anything like that, but it's got to have that kind of rural farmlet feel to it. Definitely a little bit larger, but it doesn't have to be, 5,000 plus square feet. They've gone in a few different ways as far as our showings have gone, between completely updated or needs a little bit of work. But I believe they're leaning a bit more towards turnkey than anything else.
Well, we asked her in that last meeting, you're doing great. First of all, you're doing great. And yes, hobby farm, views, space from the neighbors and a sense of privacy, but doesn't actually have to be an actual farm, and doesn't actually have to have water rights, but wants that sense of privacy and space and views and proximity to the city of Boulder without necessarily, well, definitely not being in the city of Boulder. So those are the key characteristics, and she said they are willing to do some work. There was a hesitation there because they've just gone down that road.
That's right.
And spent so much money and time doing the work. They've lived in two different, they left their home while the work was being done on their existing home. They moved out to get the work done, which is, not that easy to deal with. They lived in a couple different locations, which they said they enjoyed, but it was also a hesitation because it's not easy to move out of your home. And they've got kids that are leaving the nest, but they still want the ability for the kids to come home and visit. Exactly. So this is a home that would allow occasional use at a minimum of 3 guest rooms, plus a primary, plus probably an office. So you're looking at 5-bedroom house minimum, and nice views, private, close proximity to Boulder, maybe updated, and the design has to make some sense. So we actually have a listing that might work for them that we'll be showing. Actually, we already sent them photos of it. That is coming up soon on the market. That would be such a great match if they matched one of our coming listings, but it may not be the right fit. We're not pushing in that direction too hard, but it seems to check a lot of those boxes.
Yeah. You can tell you've been doing this for 21 years versus my 3, albeit the exposure I get. But, the phrasing you used for like, they've got kids, but they're about out of the nest. The phrasing was like so much better than I could have done.
No, I mean, Hamish, that's just, I just think of it as narrative and archetypes and where people are in life. And this is something I just didn't know getting into real estate, is that real estate transactions correspond to major life events.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's death of a loved one. It could also be children leaving the nest. It can be a divorce. It can be a marriage, second marriage. It can be a new job change, relocation to Boulder because this is where they've always wanted to live. Grandchildren. My favorite are the grandchildren. I got to tell you, the grandparents I've helped. And the reason they're buying here is 100% because there's, in the truest sense of the word, an anchor baby. It's an anchor grandbaby anchoring them. Now, we're not talking about politics here. We're talking about they are anchored to Boulder. They keep coming here, and they're like, you know what? We're tired of Airbnb-ing. We want our own little place. We want to lock and leave, and we want to be within 15 minutes to our grandkids. But we don't want to be too close, so they don't just stop by.
And so we're not smothering them.
Right, and so we're not smothering them. So that's also something we've had multiple conversations with. Some people want the house next door, and some people want the house on the other side of the city because they don't want it to be too easy to just drop by. And so it's kind of a sensitive conversation to have, like how close would you like to be to your children or grandchildren? And I've had grandparents tell me, I know they want us to live next door, but we don't want to live next door. They will we need more space from our kids, which is really funny, and our grandkids. And they tell me that when their adult children are not present. So it's really important to listen.
It's great, some of the stuff that comes out.
And think of the dynamics between the people you're showing homes to that are, especially multi-generational, but sometimes even married couples. Like there'll be one person that's in love with the home and the other person's being really quiet. And I'm looking at the body language and I'm like, let's
go to the next home.
Let's go to the next home and maybe we'll circle back. And sure enough, the person who was excited has changed their tune the next day. They're no longer interested. And you're like, well, what happened? And the answer is, well, we talked about it and I wasn't thinking about these things. And I'm like, yep, okay, cool. That's what I thought. But it's really funny to read that energy and body language between buyers. Anyway, so... All right, that's our shameless self-promotion segment. And whether you're a buyer or seller, keep in mind that your real estate agent should be acting as a fiduciary and keeping your best interests in mind. If they are not advising you from that position, you really should consider a better agent. And be careful with these long-term listing agreements, getting into a relationship with someone who does not have those long-term interests in mind, that really have their own pocketbook in mind. And there are a lot of agents like that. And it's painful to discover after you've already engaged in the process that you're working with the wrong agent because you may not be able to get out of that contract.
What's the saying? I know it's praise by name, but what's the other side of that?
Criticize by category.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Criticize by category, praise by name. That's how we stay friends with the other agents in town. So we are certainly not naming anybody, nor will we in this next segment called
Sales of the Week.
Sales of the Week. And really, it's lessons from Sales of the Week, but the lessons are sort of implied. The goal of Sales of the Week are to illustrate recent transactions at various price points that are indicative of a property type or price range or neighborhood or just a really interesting deal, and help educate you, the listener, on what's going on, and hopefully maybe entertain you a little bit as well. So our very first one fits into the category of ultra luxury in Boulder. So when you typically see things that are
gorgeous,
I don't know, that are $8 million and up, it's really arbitrary where you start this ultra luxury category. Some agents say 10. I mean, for Table Mesa, Kohler Mesa really, and this West Highland Park neighborhood, 8.9 is an ultra luxury house. And this home was completed in 2017. The address is 1775 Deer Valley Road. It sat on a almost half-acre lot. It's a 4,500 square foot home, 4 bedrooms, 1 on the main, 3 on the lower level, 5 bathrooms, a 2-car attached garage, and honestly, a spectacular view. Like a truly built around stunning views from virtually every side of the house. Really sophisticated design, very well executed. I happen to know the house because we looked at it as part of that luxury broker tour.
I was not there for this one.
Yeah. Oh, you have not seen it. Okay. Mm-mm. So when it first hit the market in October of last year, it was priced just under 10, which was smart, right? I mean, for an ultra luxury house, keep it under the $10 million break point.
Tranche? Yeah.
Tranche. Now, break point, I think in the market's probably the right description. And it was listed on April 17th, almost my birthday. Sadly, no one bought it for me, and no one else bought it either. It just sat on the market all summer.
I tried to pull the team together, Osman. I really did. Yep.
I appreciate your efforts. So after about 3 months on market, they cut the price by almost $1 million. It went from 9.7 to 8.9, so an $800,000 reduction in price, and nothing happened. 2 more months go by, and the listing was pulled off the market on September 26th. In withdrawn status, and the listing agreement expired in October. And concurrently with the withdrawn, so this is where overlapping listings occur, the day after the original listing was withdrawn, a new listing came on. So really it wasn't pulled off, it was just refreshed. And it was refreshed at 8.9. I don't see much difference in the marketing. Let me look at the photos really quick. So the original listing, looks like summer, fall photos. And the next listing looks like identical. Like I don't see, maybe a couple photos, like the glowy shot is different. Yeah, I don't see that little glowy shot. So they added like a dusk shot, but they didn't redo the entire photo stack. They just added a photo or two here or there to kind of improve its visibility. But basically, it came back on market at 8.9, the same price it fell off the day before. Nothing happens, and then November comes around, and they cut the price to 7.995. So now it's down another 905,000 from that second drop in price. So we've now had 2 price reductions from 9.7 to 7.995, and it sat on the market for almost another full month. We were starting to approach the holidays. It's after Thanksgiving, and a buyer swooped in and wrote up an offer, and they took it, and it just closed. So interestingly, it was under contract for almost 3 full months before it closed, which is pretty unusual. If you're going to have a long closing, by the way, like this, you want to go through your contingencies on a normal timeline, which should be 2 to 3 weeks. You should be through all your contingencies, and then you want to have a non-refundable earnest money deposit. Like if you really want us to hold this house for 2 more months, then we need to see some real money. And in this case, the requested earnest money was $300. I don't know if that's what was contracted, but if I was the seller, and
just check it, $300K.
Yeah, $300K. Okay. So it's an $7.5 million deal. So if I were the listing
it couldn't
agent,
be $300, but
no, $300K. I would look for $300K up front. Once we're past inspection and other contingencies, I would want that to now be $1 million. Like I would like you to park $1 million or double the earnest money. I would like some non-refundable serious money to hold it for 3 more months. In any event, it closed at 7.5, which is a pretty hefty discount from the last list. It's $495,000 off of the last list price, which we could do the math really quick. Hamish, let's do it.
That's last list, but not last sale.
What do you mean? The sale price was 7.5.
Right.
The last
just last
price,
sold 2016.
Oh no, I'm not looking at the last sold. No. So that's 6.2% from list price. Not bad, given that it was a late fourth quarter deal, and late fourth quarter. Fourth quarter is typically when you see bigger concessions, and the higher end is also. It's not atypical to see a 7% discount at the higher end for a listing that had been on market for many months. Oh, so let's talk about the house itself. One more detail. It was cool, Hamish. Like every room, like the kitchen was cool, and they even had there's a stairwell in this house that goes to the roof, and there's an electronic motor that opens up this sliding door at the top, like a flat.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing it now. That's sweet. It
slides open with a switch, and now you have access to that amazing rooftop. So. Look.
That's neat. That's some Bond,
very
style
Bond-like,
stuff.
Totally cool house. Yeah. So, Okay, so that is our deal at 1775 Deer Valley. I think that the buyer got themselves a pretty good deal, even though we're looking at 1645 a square, because it's really about that perch. It's about turnkey, and it's about design. And the home was extremely well executed. The build was very high quality. And
you mentioned them too, but views. I mean, yeah.
I mean, over and over again, views. This isn't just a little view. This is, you are surrounded by epic scenery of South Boulder, and you can see all the Flatirons. You can see, it's just, you feel like you're the king of the mountain up there. It's really cool.
Yeah. Shameless plug here. It's in Devil's Thumb. We just made a video on Devil's Thumb. Check it out on our YouTube, House Einstein.
It's not in Devil's Thumb, Hamish.
I take it all back. Don't watch the video.
You can watch the video, but it's not Devil's Thumb. It's off of Kohler Mesa. It's just down from Hollyberry, and I think
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not. Foxtail, Hollyberry, Deer Valley is a really, people that know Table Mesa know exactly where Deer Valley is. It's just a really special spot. There's a little trailhead at the end of Hollyberry. I mean, cool. And you have easy access on the Kohler Mesa. You know where that little zigzag is, but yeah, it is not technically Devil's Thumb. Nor
the video is
access.
still cool.
The video is cool. Watch the Devil's Thumb video, but that's not this. That's not this location.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Next
up, 7217 Coyote Trail.
Oh, the strange case of Coyote.
The strange mystery of Coyote. And the property just closed at $5.6 million. It's a 3,000 square foot primary home with a 3,800 square foot post and beam barn behind it, and almost 62 acres of land. And in the description for water rights say that you get shares in you're part of left-hand district water, but you do have water rights. Although the water rights are not entirely clear what the water rights were, and valuing those are important for anything that has ag potential. I'm going to add that into this as disclosure. Even though I've been doing this 21 years and have my finance background, I would be very, very hesitant to put a number on water rights, because in a wet year they're not worth nearly as much, and in a dry year they can be worth a fortune. But what's really interesting about this listing, so it originally hit the market in May of 2024 and was listed at 6.5 for 2 days and then pulled off. And all of the commentary has been removed from that original listing. It's not clear what happened, but the property was off the market from June 30th. So the month of July, August, September, October, and then November 1st, precisely 5 months later, it's back on the market. And now it's listed at $6.1 million with a completely different agent. These photos are available, and we'll put a link into the show notes for this listing. It's located just southwest of the airport. So there's an airport of the Vance Brand Airport. So let me be clear, this is not the Boulder Airport. This is out in open space just north of Lagerman Reservoir, and sort of northeast of, I mean, you're south of McIntosh Lake. You're just west of the airport, the Vance Brand Airport, not the Boulder Airport, which I think this might set a record for property in that location, Hamish, because the closer you get to Boulder, the more valuable these types of hobby farm properties become. And 5.6 is a pretty significant number, even though they've talked about the world-class barn.
The barn is heavily marketed in this one.
I've never seen a barn market. I mean, the barn photo is gorgeous, right? Like, that's really spectacular barn photo. And it might be real sunset, because that's the direction the sun would be setting. The fake glowy windows. But then you've got a modern 1990s era house that probably needed quite a bit of updating. But there's more barn photos than there are house photos. It has an Adobe Southwest style to it. Obviously a custom home and very impressive. The kitchen's dated, but people can, imagine updating their own kitchen. Overall, a really, really lovely property, but $5.6 million would have my head scratching a little bit.
There's got to be something to the land, right?
I mean, 60 acres with supposedly flowing water rights, hayfields, arena barn, paddock, homestead, ADU, and protected by Boulder County conservation easements to the north, and private farmland to the west. And so I've been looking at these types of properties for a while, and for a few years, 1.2 was basically a value. You could get a totally rundown, beat up ranch, farmette that had a home that needed to be scraped but had maybe a couple of acres. This is 60 acres and a home that, although 90s era, is still pretty current. And then you have to think about the value of the conservation easements and the potential that the farmland that is privately owned next door might be developed, and what the view corridor would look like. It's an interesting one to comp out.
Yeah, this one's... We would have a probably easy 2-hour pricing analysis if we were approaching this with a buyer.
Well, even more, because we would need to bring in my
Lawyers.
attorney.
Yeah.
Well, there's an attorney that we advise using when it comes to analyzing water rights, because it is complex. And this listing agent is smart enough to say valuable water rights as incredibly valuable, but doesn't put a number on them. I've seen agents put numbers on them, and that is really dangerous, because the ditch company is setting the market. And who knows if they're really telling you the truth about previous sales or not. And I mean, it's complex. So the way to deal with that type of situation is a long close. And in fact, that seems to actually, it's not what we have here. So the offer happened 97 days in, and the closing was 117 days to close. So they had like a normal timeline for being under contract to closing. So the listing hit the second time in November. The seller cut the price right before Christmas to 5.3, and then magically increased the price a few days later to 5.7, which makes me wonder if additional land or maybe the water rights were being negotiated. It's not clear why the seller increased the price from 5.3 to 5.7, but it did go under contract February 11th. That's this year, and it did close at 5.6. So only about 90,000 below the last list price. And I kind of think there's more to this story about what was included in the sale for the price to go up, which could have been an adjacent lot or maybe more water rights. But the time period
maybe
is
some farm equipment. Yeah.
I mean, 300,000 of farm equipment, maybe. It's an interesting deal, and we don't have insider knowledge. But the one thing I do want to impress upon buyers is that if you're buying something that requires a more complex analysis of valuation, you should write an offer that's based on the best of your knowledge, but your due diligence should include enough time to evaluate conservation easements for their protective covenants, value the water rights properly, and consider the potential impact of actual development on the adjacent farmland. So all of that is really important, and you may also be able to get ag tax exemptions. Like the current property taxes on this are pretty reasonable, $11,531, but that was based on an assessed value of, let's see if the last assessed value is in here. It looks like the assessed value is 1.687, right? That's the last assessed value, and you've sold it for 4 times that number. So I sure hope you get some agricultural.
I don't want to say kickbacks.
No, agricultural. You get the tax rate of ag land, which is far lower. And the legal description also includes a conservation easement. So that's why it just surprises me how fast this deal closed. I would have looked for a 60-day close minimum for something this complex, and be prepared to negotiate for more if you can't get the answers in 60 days.
Yeah.
But that's why, Hamish, we have a due diligence checklist and a due diligence kickoff call, and we talk about due diligence extensely because, you're
the
putting
chagrin of our attorneys.
who don't want us to talk about it. But $5.6 million is no chump change. That, every home requires due diligence, but the higher up in price you go, the more thorough your due diligence really should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not in love with the house design, since they're here talking about it. The barn's pretty. This home doesn't compel me all that much. Yeah. I mean, of course I'd live in it, but...
Yeah, you would live in it and live large, Hamish. You would be like... I
certainly would. Think of all the cars you could fit in that barn.
That's
have your
true.
own track. Yeah.
You might have to get into horses.
Darn.
I mean,
famously an inexpensive hobby. Yeah.
I grew up on quite a bit of land in upstate New York, and it's great having that much land. And the land around my parents' house is all forest or recovering old field. And having that much private land is really cool. It feels really good to have that much space from the neighbors. And if you are affluent and have a thing for horses, or your kids do, there aren't a lot of options. But I agree that the overall design of the house itself is not compelling. The photo is even like photo 2, which shows the blue doors, is sort of flat.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of frankly boring as a photo. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to criticize this agent. I just think that if you're going to cross the $5 million mark, you better be. Everything should look like the barn photos. Like the barn
Kinda
photos.
eye-popping. Yeah, the barn photos.
The barn photos look great. The house photos look kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. So that is 7217 Coyote Trail in Longmont. And just as a little token reminder here, we don't talk about active listings on this podcast because we're not allowed to. And when we do publish the newsletter, which I failed to do last month, we do talk about active listings, but only to our prospective clients. And the only way to get our pithy commentary about active listings is by subscribing to our newsletter, which you'll find at houseeinstein.com. Okay, 2 more to go, Hamish, and then we're done. How are we doing on time?
We're fine. Well, 12. Yeah, we've got 50 minutes before you have to leave.
Okay, we got time. Yeah. We're going to keep ripping through it.
Oh, all right. I just noticed you're on Mac. You looked top right for the time, right? Yeah.
Is that the tell?
Yeah, right, because their Finder bar and everything's at the top of the screen.
I mean, I love PCs, and up until 4 years ago was exclusively on PCs, but I switched to a Mac for video processing capability, and everything is better. Everything works, and it doesn't keep expanding. The hard drive doesn't keep getting shrunk down to the operating system.
I don't know what that was. Yeah,
I still haven't figured that out, and I just got so annoyed by that. I now am on 2 different Macs and I still have a PC for bookkeeping purposes, but I would like to get off of that too if my accountant lets me. All right.
Perfect.
Sorry, Rick. Throwing you under the bus on the podcast. All right, let's talk about our third listing of the week. The address is 3018 14th Street. And this is a property that is in a little segment of North Boulder that is located just south of Growing Gardens, where I used to serve on the board. So it is sort of north of Elder and south of the Gardens, or which would have been Forest Ave if it continued through. And there's like a little lollipop of homes. There's also a dead-end street, Washington Street, 15th Street, 17th Street. All of these kind of fit into that category of just south of the Gardens, sort of southeast of the tennis courts and the North Boulder Rec Center. And for a variety of reasons, this area has been a hotbed of redevelopment in the last 10 to 15 years. We've seen a lot of dilapidated old 50s and 60s era ranches get bought up, and then people build gorgeous newer homes. Sometimes they retain the foundation, sometimes they don't, which of course should affect your eventual sale price. Tip, hint, hint, check into that and have a discussion with your agent about the differences. It's important to understand them. But this particular house was built, and I think it was actually rebuilt. I'm not pulling up the permits right now, but based on the design of the house, it looks like they kept the original ranch and popped in a second-story addition and turned it sideways on the lot. It's a 7,500 square foot lot, 7461. The home was completed in 2020. The tax record sometimes is the giveaway because the tax record doesn't always update. It may show you the effective year. Yeah, there it is. Year built 1957. Effective year built 2010. So that tells you right away that you're looking, and then the listing says it's 2020. So due diligence tip here, when you see that sort of pattern, it usually means you better pull up the permit records and get the real history of whether this is a 2020 house or a 1950s house with an addition. Like, what are you actually looking at here? So this particular home was listed at $3.4 million. It's 4,200 square feet, 4,245, a 5-bedroom, 5-bath, kind of classic floor plan. 3 bedrooms on the upper, 1 on the main, which is so vital for offices or for people that may have someday a mobility issue, and then 1 bedroom in the basement. And only a 1-car garage, which is a bit of a deficit, but the overall design is very attractive. They basically made a modern home of a 1950s era home, and it's got a really cool deck above the garage. I mean, the photos are very tasty. All the finishes are spot on for a modern home. Like, literally, there's nothing to complain about in any of this home's marketing except for maybe
got
the
one.
dirty carpet.
I'm hoping it's dirt, or sorry, I'm hoping it's the pattern, like one side's
dirt,
lighter. It's dirt.
just dirt.
Yeah.
And it's gray carpet with brown vents, which, I mean, you're spending $3.5 million. Go get gray vents.
Or replace the carpet.
And replace the carpet, both. Like, everything else was spot on except for a few details like that are like, why would you include that photo? You just don't include that photo.
Well, it's sold for above list. What do we know?
Okay. Okay, so let's get to the sale price of the home. Because after reviewing the comps, which we did for this home, because I was really surprised by its listing history. Oh, the sauna's nice. Okay, so let me talk about the deal. So this particular listing hit the market on January 7th, and it was listed at 3.2. It was under contract almost immediately. So officially 3 days, but when you see 3 days as the time it took, 3 days coming soon status, then it went active, and then it was under contract 3 days later. When you see something happening that fast, it usually means there may have been multiple offers, and some people moved very fast. It could have been under contract the very first day. You're not required to change the listing status for 3 business days. So the actual days that are reflected on the MLS are not always accurate. But the fact it went for more than list suggests that there were more than one offer for this house, and it eventually sold for 3.402. Which is sort of an oddball number, but we do the same thing sometimes in a bidding war. And it closed on February 28th, so the very last day of February, the deal closed. And there were no disclosed concessions on the deal, and it's described as other, which usually it's cash or it's conventional, and in this case it's other. So I'm not entirely sure how the financing of this home worked, but it doesn't really matter. The buyer forked over 3.4, which is $152,000 over list, and that caught my eye and caught your eye. Like, whoa, why are we seeing a
especially
bidding
off
war?
the back of our conversation right at the closing table?
Right, the market is slowing. Well, modern homes are relatively rare. Homes that are turnkey are relatively rare, and sometimes a buyer that's been looking for a while knows what they really want, and it's also arguable that the listing agent underpriced it intentionally. And doing that as a strategy is not the worst approach in a market that is cool and flat. And so we went and actually pulled up the comps on this one because I was very curious how this played out. And it ended up being at about $800 a square. And we only looked at newer homes that, hang on a second, let me open the cart. Where is the right cart?
We've got a few now.
I know there's so many sale of the week carts here, Hamish. I'm like trying to find there. Oh, there it is. Okay, I spelled comps with 2 O's. Cooms. Okay. Cooms. So when I look at Cooms for this house and we put it into what else sold in the last 12 months, we see homes that sold off market for $682 a square, very similar in terms of location and condition, larger lot. And I would argue that seller who closed in January left money out, arguably left some money on the table by not putting it on the MLS. They were planning to list it for 3.2, but somebody came in with a $3 million offer and they took it. Very similar house. So that was at $682 a square, and that's dollar per total square. And then you have 2926 16th Street. So sorry, that first address is 3015 Jefferson. The second one is 2926 16th Street. And this home hit $820 a square, built in 2024. And this one is described as newly constructed. And I believe it. I think that this one actually was a completely new home. And a quick click on the tax record can confirm that. And sure enough, it says year built 2023, effective year built 2023. That's a brand new house, although they listed it as 2024. Maybe that's based on when they got there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to completely derail you. No. Do you want to send these over to me? I'll chuck them in the show notes so you guys can see the comps too.
No problem.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Because, I mean, from a personal standpoint, when we did go through these comps, I would have rathered some of the other ones that you're going to be talking about than this particular one. Especially if
You mean this one's not really I think this one's pretty It's a little south,
3018
so it's not...
isn't really my taste, yeah.
3018 is not as compelling, but it's still functionally a comp. 2926 16th Street is south of Elder, so it's a little closer to Balsam, but I think and it's a smaller house, but it's much newer. It truly is a new house, and it has a 2-car attached garage. And then you get the one our target is 3018 14th Street, which went for 3.4 or 800 a square. And then there were two houses that sold for significantly more. There was 2940 14th Street that closed on January 30th for 3.6, and that was at 7.
That would be my pick.
That would be my pick too. I think that's the most compelling. It was literally on the market 2 days and closed in 15. Like that, somebody was not letting that one go. But it sold full list, not a bidding war. And I think priced right at $722 a square, a little bigger. And the key thing is 2-car attached garage. And then you have 2834 15th Street. Also 2024 build, closed in September of last year at 3.7. And that also was not just, that one was truly new. And it closed at 3.7, 4,400 square feet, 2-car attached garage. Yeah. So my initial thought was, wow, somebody overpaid. I'm not
Mine too.
I'm not convinced they did. I think the listing agent priced intentionally low, and it's not a brand new house like these other ones. It's a restaurant. It's like a foundation was retained, and then built in a whole new house on top of it with a second story.
A lot like that home in the Newlands neighborhood that we talked about last week, right? The one with the brick facade, if you remember that.
Hamish, I see so many houses in the course of a week, and I'm getting old that I don't remember the house you're talking about. But
if you're listening, check that one out too. Very similar, I think.
Yeah. Okay, well, certainly. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But the other thing to think about is if you were the buyer and you saw 5 options in the last 12 months or 6 months or 9 months that were similar, 4 of which are better houses, or at least 2 of which are better houses, was it worth getting into a bidding war? I hope they're really happy for it, but it was a very interesting deal. And I think that it was intentionally underpriced to get it sold quickly and make up for the 1-car garage factor.
Mm. And while, like you said, there's a lot of new builds in here. While that one isn't completely new, perhaps that was the strategy, right? Price a little bit lower. It was photographed as though it was a very new construction, and I think that was pretty clever strategy.
I mean, it was listed as 2020, which arguably is the effective year. It's just... It's a whole podcast to have a discussion of the difference between a truly new house and a home with a new foundation that has a second-story addition. The second-story addition is going to meet the code at the time, but the first floor does not necessarily have to. And the code is across the board, things like insulation, and there's all sorts of stuff that goes into play. And
insulation's top of mind for me too, though. Yeah. And
the city may also, and also the degree of engineering in the original foundation. The engineering standards have changed since the 50s pretty dramatically. So
I hope so.
Yeah, we all hope so. Okay, let's move on. So that is number 3 of our list. And
Niwot.
Number 3 or number 4? Okay, let's skip ahead.
3.
That's number 3. Let's go to Niwot. And we're not going to talk about this one as extensively, other than I think this is a really good data point because we often drag our buyers to Niwot because it's... For the price, you get a lot more house, you get fantastic schools, you get a historic downtown, and you're less than a 15-minute drive to Boulder proper, presuming that you're not trying to drive at rush hour. And you don't get all the crime that happens in Boulder, you don't get the students, you don't get the encampments. And all of that is beneficial. And the cute historic downtown used to have one of my favorite restaurants. It's closed. I'm not sure what's replaced it yet. The 1820 or 1920 house, it's gone. But I love Niwot. I wouldn't hesitate to live in it. It's a good comparable to, say, Louisville. And this particular house, 7181 Longview Drive, was a 1990s era house with a 3-car attached garage, 5-bedroom, 5-bath, solid layout that works for the vast majority of buyers, 5,700 total square on a on a 29,000 square foot lot, so almost 2/3 of an acre, actually more than 2/3 of an acre. And the home itself, this is where it sort of falls down, like on paper, all that checks. And then you look at the house and it's like, okay, it's kind of a conventional, traditional style house with finishes that are not going to embarrass you when you invite guests over, but it doesn't have the gee whiz pow factor of a modern house. But you also get fantastic views. You can see Long's Peak in the, from your bathtub, which, I mean, I guess, okay.
Pretty spectacular.
There's also a deck right there, so you're really going to have that full nude experience with a family of 5 living there and watching the view. Maybe. I mean, it's Boulder. We're hippies. That's cool. Yeah. But the house itself, it's not. It doesn't have the sizzle of a modern house, but it has the
really
function.
Doesn't. Yeah, it's got the size, it's got the footprint.
It's traditional, and as long as it's well executed and solidly built with really high quality attention to detail in the finishes, I think there's nothing wrong with a traditional house. They don't age as fast as modern homes, and some of the aspects of a modern home are alienating to live in. Like that sort of glass house feel can feel very uncomfortable actually living in it. And this house also had a really cool saltwater pool. Like that's
it's saltwater. That's neat. Yeah.
Yeah, it has cool stuff going on, and it looks like a real sunset in the photos. But the
last photo is uneven. It's on.
Does that drive you crazy?
It does. It looks like the house is on a slant itself.
Yeah, the last photo is horrible. I don't know what they were thinking with that last photo.
Very
but at least they're
strange.
using real sunsets, and you can see the glass flare, the lens flare from the sun in the patio shot.
Cool.
We're going to give them some props to not cheaping out and using fake photography. But only, and it's Boulder, only 2.3. In the city of Boulder, this would be like a $4 million plus, depending on location.
Put this in Newlands, right?
Put this in, this in Newlands. It reminds me of a certain house we've already talked about today.
It sure does. I just had my doorbell ring. That's the locators. I'm going to go let them know where my utilities are, and I will be right back.
Let's do our last sale of the week, and that happens to be a deal that we happen to know a lot about because we represented the buyers. And this should be a reminder that even though we often talk about just the high end of the market or in the mid-range, we serve all clients at all price points. And in this particular case, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath condo at Wimbledon, 3000 Colorado Ave, unit B108. And it's about 1,200 square feet, so a little bigger than your typical Martin Acres ranch in terms of square footage. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1 official off-street parking space, but you also get the option to pay for permits outside your parking space. So all the people that live there actually were parking their car in the complex, which was one of our original considerations. Rented out.
There was, what is it? Carport permitting and a guest spot. That's how they run it.
Not exactly. The carport parking spaces are attached to certain units. This was not one of them.
Okay.
And then there are assigned spaces.
Oh, that's right.
That you get. So you get 1 assigned space with this unit, and then the tenants were also obtaining 2 permitted spots. And I'm not sure if that was an extra fee or not, but they had 3 parking spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a perfect location for a CU kiddie condo. And we say kiddie condo sort of euphemistically, but what we're talking about are privately owned condos and townhomes that are in close proximity to the University of Colorado. And we had a whole podcast devoted to the CU Parent Dilemma, which we encourage you to listen to. I believe it was podcast 69.
That might have been the last podcast.
The last podcast. So check that out, and you will learn a lot about what to think about if you are considering a CU kiddie condo. And 3 bedrooms works really well because guess what? Kids like to live together. And this side of campus is the more serious side of campus, but the building was built in the 60s. So it has some 60s style architecture and some 60s environmental issues and that sort of thing. It's a super intelligent choice. I mean, it's only 600. So the list was 609. We closed at 600. And we had the seller address a bunch of inspection items that were legit, like an old electrical panel and old breakers that needed to be upgraded and that sort of thing.
That was cool to see.
That was cool that they could retrofit it safely. An electrician handled that. Rented out at $3,200 a month, so our clients don't need it for a while. So they're going to keep the tenants in place, and those tenants have a lease that carries through. But the additional due diligence involved reviewing leases, estoppel statements,
compliance
as well as
with rental regulations.
Compliance with rental regulations, and ultimately it's a solid play. There was a little bit of confusion over at the end. Got to carefully handle this in how we describe it, but the lesson for us was around due diligence, and I think going forward when it comes to what's included and not included in the association fee, it's important to have a conversation with the listing agent and get it in writing and maybe confirm it with the association, because this complex is a rare one in that it bills back gas and hot water. and sewer charges to the owners through the HOA. It's
Yeah.
not part of the normal monthly dues. And in the MLS, it says that those, at least water and sewer, are included as part of the association fees. But the full fees were not included because they're billed back separately. And that was a last-minute hiccup in the transaction. Otherwise, the transaction went really, really smoothly. Mm-hmm. And I think our client's going to be incredibly happy with this purchase over a 3 or 4 year holding period. And in fact, I told him that at the end of your student's tenure, when they're eventually ready to sell it, please call me, because there's a good chance I would want to buy this. One of our favorite clients and investors owns a unit here, and he's been very happy with it for many years. And I think I vaguely recall helping him buy it, but it's been that long. I think it was like 2008 that I helped him buy it.
I wasn't around.
I believe I helped him buy it, but we've worked with him. He's like our record holder. Like, he needs to get a hat for the number of times we've represented him.
Gonna have to pick your brain on who that is, because I have an inkling, but
yeah. Breckenridge, and we'll leave it at
okay.
that. Our last Breck deal. Okay.
Easy.
So he needs a hat. I have some in the office to give him. But he's one of the smartest investors I know, and he's extremely happy with the performance of this over long periods of time. And he has sold his underperforming assets in Boulder. In fact, we sold them for him. And this one is still a winner as far as I understand. And so $600 for 3 bedrooms, and one of those bedrooms is really large. You could easily put 2 students in there. So this could function as a 4-bedroom property, assuming that there's no rules that prohibit that. Right. I think it's a great investment. And it closed the very last day of February, and the listing agent was extremely professional. We had a great experience working with them. Would love to work with them again. And really solid play for the CU Kitty condo investment option.
Yeah, great deal. I think you hit all the notes. I didn't actually personally see this home, so I've just gone off the photos, and that's me. But
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting choice, Hamish, in terms of the menu of options. It's CU. I'm sorry you didn't actually get a chance to see it. The tenants were lovely and had great communication. They're all STEM kids, which are always near and dear to my heart as a STEM kid. Like, they tend to be serious. And they also had great communication and were warm and friendly and seemed very responsible. Versus, I mean, I remember when I went to undergrad, the biz students were the partiers. And they didn't have labs. And us poor science kids were, like, in school for an extra 8 hours a week. And it really made a difference in attitude. And the science courses were hard. Some of them were, especially organic chem, I remember barely passing by the skin of my teeth. So,
I'm big pro STEM, absolutely.
Maybe I'm just prejudiced for the STEM kids, but they were so nice and warm and friendly and responsible, and have been taking good care of the place. So I think that they'll be great tenants for the landlord, and that's just icing on the cake, right? Like, there's another unit that popped up and is currently on the market that is about $10,000 less, with very similar rental dynamics, but a huge unknown over how the tenants exist. And so I wouldn't even if there wasn't a hiccup, even with the hiccup, I wouldn't have recommended switching transactions and fighting this transaction over this issue, because there could be a whole host of unknowns, and a bad tenant could easily cost you more than $10,000. So don't be foolish. Be not so foolish and look at another one. The thing that's really cool about this development is tennis courts and pools. 3 separate pools.
Oh, it does. Yeah, no shit. Kidding.
Oh, you could swear, Hamish. This is not a shot. This is not a family-friendly podcast. You could occasionally throw F-bombs and S-bombs.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing, last thing I want to say is we learned something from every transaction, and we're now putting together kind of a little series about what we learned. And in this particular case, we learned that, you can't entirely trust the MLS when it comes to what may or may not be included, and you should always, if it matters, which is why we do a due diligence check, a due diligence kickoff call and a checklist, we really should identify it early. And we really need to have that list of questions that we build in that first week in the transaction to ask the seller and through the listing agent to verify certain information. Because even on the MLS, it says at the bottom, information deemed reliable but not guaranteed. And And that alone gives, a lot of room and leeway for cover your ass.
Yep.
For
CYA,
agents.
for sure.
And often brokers will put in the remarks, as we do as well, that the buyer is responsible for verifying all this information. That's part of the buyer's due diligence. And it's a long, hard, and often sad road to try to get, some sort of compensation for something like that. But I look, we're on our tenant side. It's our buyer's side. It's it's a little bit like when you look at the other ones and how they're listed. Most of them are listed disclosing this fee better, and this one does not. So, in any event,
a little bit more ambiguous. Yeah.
We still love doing transactions with that agent and have a lot of respect for them, and want to make that clear how that ball went down, how that deal went down. So
this there's a picture on here that's a screenshot of Google Maps, and it shows that it's a 15-minute walk. I love that, but I don't. For us, we don't use Google. And
you're not allowed to use Google.
Yeah.
Screenshots are not okay.
It's great, but dang.
Well.
We could use OpenStreetMap maybe and draw a line and say, this means that, but it's nice. It's a nice illustration. Maybe just pins.
Maybe just pins. You could use OpenStreetMaps and you could put the times on. But yeah, it's not our job to enforce the MLS rules or the copyright rules for
Google
image use. Yeah, Google can afford to enforce their own copyright. Okay. That is our last sale of the week. What's left to talk about, Hamish?
We've got 25 minutes to cover news and our carve-outs.
All right, we're going to do hot takes on the news so that we move a little faster because, these are just our somewhat educated opinions on a couple of new items hitting the wires this week.
Yeah. You got to intro the first one.
I'm trying to pull it up and I've lost the screen. So hold on a second. Let me find it. Look at there it is. All right. Okay, our first news article is about the loss of federal jobs and the potential increasing loss of jobs in the city of Boulder from DOGE and the administrative changes happening in the federal government. And there is a lot of... So this article is from the Colorado Sun. It hit yesterday, March 4th. It's worth looking at it. We'll put a link in the show notes. And my hot take is that, yes, we're going to see hundreds of job losses, most likely. Probably not thousands, but hundreds in total. However, most of the homes that are owned by federal employees have been owned for long periods of time.
You're saying long-time equity, right? They
have a lot of equity, and they probably have a lot of savings. And the last time we had a significant downturn, which was the 2006 to 2009 downturn, the city of Boulder had the lowest foreclosure rate in Boulder County, and Boulder County had the lowest foreclosure rate of any of the surrounding counties. So my takeaway after that experience is that Boulder is a very smart city, and it also is smart, resilient financially, and the owners here typically don't make high risk decisions with their money. They have locked in low rate mortgages. I think that the workers that own homes are likely middle market homes for which there's a lot of demand, not $3+ million or $5+ million homes. So I don't think it's going to add much, if anything. Even in the more dire scenarios that people have been spinning about what might happen with federal job losses, I think it's going to be a drop in the bucket. If there's somebody forced this, it's going to be outliers that you might have a couple of houses hit the market from people that have to sell because they lost their jobs. I think it's not so likely that you're going to see inventory increase from this particular instance, from this particular situation.
It is something where I guess we're reporting on it, and we had talked about kind of like Boulder's economy here, right? And it's got that kind of like federal corner, and then it's got the college corner, and it's pretty robust. So I think it's worth us mentioning and bringing up to you guys, to you listeners.
We also have a lot of tech jobs. We have a lot of startups, and believe it or not, we have a lot of investment firms too. back in my day when I had access to Capital IQ, I pulled down a list of investment firms based in Boulder, and I was shocked at how many investment companies were here. And that was 2013. I think that increasingly we see people that are affluent have created their own companies, investors, private equity firms, venture capitalist firms. They base here because the quality of life is so good. And we're close to a major airport, and you've got the research labs, and you've got the university, and the university has a lot of research happening. Yes, we could have some disruption, but I don't think it's a lot. If anything happens, it's a short-term blip. That's my take on what's likely.
I'm gonna agree and fingers crossed with you.
Okay, all right, Hamish. In the interest of time, I think we're gonna skip this next one, next news article. Let's just go right to Carveout.
Should we leave the link just for interested folk?
Well, okay, sure. We're going to leave the link. It's about Boulder receiving a $900,000 grant to mitigate about 100 acres of land that help protect our water supply. And also there's an article about how the FAIR plan is coming online. That's the FAIR insurance program that the state is putting in place to assist homeowners who are unable to find homeowners insurance otherwise due to increasing fire risk. And there's some nuance in understanding how risk modeling and on the ground reality don't always match up, and trying to create a more level or fair playing field between homeowners and insurance companies. It's a moving space. It's worth tracking, particularly when it comes to the value of mountain homes.
Yeah, great pick for that one. Okay, should we carve out?
Let's carve out. Oh, not just mountain homes, but also homes in the wildland urban interface. So that includes all of Table Mesa. That includes Dakota Ridge. Like, those homes are also subject to some very high insurance premiums, and those are increasing with time. Okay, Let's carve out, Hamish.
All right. This is going to be a carve out that I will follow up with y'all May 5th. So Resource Central is an organization in Colorado. I don't know if it's anywhere else. And they team up with local municipalities and water providers to kind of incentivize the efficient use or reduction in use of water, being water wise. So one of the programs that they do is Garden in a Box. Yesterday, I waited in an online queue to purchase a Garden in a Box because the emails made it sound like it was just going to fly off the shelf. They didn't. And the website also had like a delay to purchase. Besides the point, I've purchased or pre-ordered a Rocky Mountain Colorado Oasis is the name of it, Garden in a Box. It's comprised of 15 plants. They're all native to Colorado. They're all super low water and high sun tolerant, and it's projected that they cover about 60 square foot. So that's my little carve out. I'm going to try my green thumb out in May when the pickup date is, and a section of my front yard will be the Colorado Oasis. So kind of excited to do that. I picked up some weed mat. I'm going to go back to Costco. They've got a bunch of soil and stuff right now. So grab some soil to do some planting, and who knows, maybe I'll have a pretty native Colorado. I hesitate to use the term xeriscape, but that type of yard. So
why are you hesitating to use the term xeriscape?
Doesn't it mean something else, or like there's more nuance to it, or is this xeriscaping?
I thought xeriscaping is just low water use, and then people couple it with low water and native grasses and plants.
Then maybe that. Maybe it's counterproductive, because right now I have like a dead lawn that's a cricket haven. So this could be more water use in the long run, but at least it's going to look good. Yeah.
Dead lawn that crickets love is probably not the right look, but I appreciate that you're not going Kentucky bluegrass. It's really sort of silly. I mean, I don't know. I have my opinions.
It's so
about
common.
Grass lawns. Yeah. I like having open outdoor space. Watering and cutting grass seems to be really wasteful in a high desert environment.
Yeah. And Westminster provides a $25 discount. So that was cool.
Nice.
I got it discounted for a smidge, and then they asked for it back in a donation.
Huh. Is this the same Resource Central that sells, resource on Arapahoe that repurposes diverted construction material? Okay, I think it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think I've seen their Garden in the Box available in Boulder as well.
Yep. No, it is the same one. So yeah, they're huge, and they'll help you like remove your lawn and stuff as well, or discount the cost at least. So
where most homeowners involve resources that they get a permit and they have to deconstruct and repurpose materials. They can't just truck it to the landfill. And that adds substantial cost. But for people that are crafty, you can go check out the facility on Arapahoe, and I think there are other facilities throughout the metro area where you can pick up building materials, repurpose building materials, fixtures, doors, windows.
Sinks. I've heard of some really nice sinks that are there.
Great sinks, cabinets, you name it. They may have it, and if you're creative, you get it for like pennies on the dollar. It's really cool. And if you're creative, you can use those things in very interesting ways.
So, who knows? The saga continues, but I will update on the garden in a box in May.
All right. Sounds good. All right, my Carveout. I am about to embark on a relatively mild road trip. For a few days, I'll be in Death Valley. And it's part of a little motorcycle rally. I'll be driving my van out there, which is a 2011 adventure van with a 2017 four-wheel drive conversion and a pop top.
It's a diesel, right?
It's not a diesel. It's a 5.4 gasser. And the last time I changed the oil was 2 years ago. But the amount of miles I've driven is probably about 4,000 miles.
Oh,
yeah. And it's
I do
not
every
just
3.
It's not just full synthetic. It's Amsoil full synthetic, which is sort of super premium oil. It wouldn't be that big of a deal to change. It's the good stuff. It's expensive because I want this van to last, and the van has low mileage. I think it has roughly 40,000 miles on it.
Yeah, that's super impressive.
If you check Grok and ask how often should you change your low mileage vehicle oil based on time, it quotes you the old standard of every 12 months, which is based on petroleum products, original petroleum products. It says every 12 months. And I was really shocked by that because I said synthetic oil. And then, of course, I went down certain forums, and there's everything from I change it every 6 months to I change it every 5 years. And a number of people have sent in their oil for analysis and said even at 5 years, it said don't change it. And I'm like, well, I don't know how comfortable I feel at year 2. I think it'll be fine, but it creates this rabbit hole with vehicles and maintenance with how frequently you should be doing things. And I thought I'd ask you, Hamish, you're a 5-year guy, so you're like, whatever, it's fine.
5-year? No, I don't know.
How often? You said 3.
Oh, 3K miles. So every 3,000 miles, I plan to do an oil change. Yeah.
Even full synthetic.
Yep. I know it's overkill, but it allows me to miss that deadline and still get it in, under 5,000 miles or something like that. I'm full synthetic on most things. I run a diesel Rotella T4 in my 2 V8 cars, actually in the Pathfinder as well. And the only one I go super premium for is my Hyundai Elantra. And those engines have a habit of spinning rod bearings. It's an interesting thought on I haven't reached the mileage oil change threshold, but the car has been sitting for a couple years. I check the dipstick, make sure that no water got in there somehow as well. That would settle at the bottom of the dipstick, so I'm not really sure how you'd check that. But that would be more top of mind for me. As far as a interval, it doesn't hurt, right? It's better to be on the safe side than anything, and I'm well aware 3K is super overkill, but it's peace of mind synthetic. For me. Yeah.
Well, you also hammer your cars pretty hard when you drive them.
Depending on the car, yeah.
Okay, and
the Hyundai's glass, man. I'm so gentle to that thing.
Well, now you have me wondering maybe I should change the oil, but I think I'm going to risk it and go with this drive of about 2,000 miles. It's steady state driving. I'll check the oil and see what it looks like. I'll rub it on my fingers and see if it feels
a little taste test.
Yeah, I see if it still feels slippery. I'll smell it. I don't know. It just seems like it's not the cost, it's the time. Like I need to go order this oil, get it delivered because you can't pick it up at stores, and then I need to. I did install a Fumoto valve, so that makes it really easy.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And it needs a new filter. Not that big of a deal, but it's still like an hour minimum plus waiting for the stuff to arrive. And I still have to lube the trailer to tow the bike, so I got to put axle grease in that thing. I don't know. I'm tempted to just roll the die, but now you're saying things that make me nervous, so I don't know.
I run things pretty haggard too. I had a car that leaked enough oil that I could only ever top it up, and then I would just over intervals change the filter. Never received a full oil flush.
See, I don't do that because you're just dumping oil into the environment. That just feels bad.
It was evaporating. It is the environment technically, but no. For the most part, I'm pretty solid on the 3K change. The Pathfinder, that's a Carveout on its own. I got that thing up and running last night to help my cousin move some furniture, and it was out of gas, it was out of brake fluid, and it was out of battery, and the tires were low. And I'd started it like last weekend, and it was fine.
Well, you have to drive it too. You have to move it. You have to let it get up to operating temperature for a while to burn off that condensation. Actually, and okay. Well,
that was my lesson learned on that. Yeah,
I think this is a good spot to end the pod, Hamish. What do you think?
I think so too. I'm excited for the Death Valley stories, and look at that, dude. A minute 47. Good on us.
Excellent. So thank you so much, dear listeners. You've wasted another 2 hours. Just kidding. Of course, you're not wasting it, but we deeply appreciate you joining us for the House Einstein podcast. If you like what you hear, check out houseeinstein.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can reach out to us on our socials as well. We are on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or X, and starting to be on Blue Sky as well. And we deeply appreciate your comments. And even when you tell us we got something wrong, we're always seeking to improve here at House Einstein. We welcome your feedback, and we hope to catch you again next time.
Absolutely. Take care.